Welcome back to another episode of the Style Frame Saturdays podcast, where great motion design starts with one favorite frame and the fresh ideas behind it. I'm your host, Caroline Late, and today we're joined by Justin and Audrey Havey of Sword and Shield, where the melding of craft and concept is sacred. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on the show. How's everything going today?
Great. Thank you so much for having us. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Happy to have you guys here. Well, before we dive into the project portion of the show, I'd love for our audience to learn a little bit more about you both first. So for anyone who may be unfamiliar with you and your work, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourselves and how you got into the field of motion design and film?
Yeah, so trying to think back. I went to Columbus College of Art and Design for graphic design and advertising, kind of from like an illustration background. And I think just over a lot of years and a lot of just time and soul searching, finding myself within all kinds of mediums of illustration design. And then that led naturally into animation and motion design. Definitely more on the self-taught realm, funny enough. I always kind of wanted to dive more into that during school and everything, but found myself, I think COVID was kind of an era of like just learning on my own and everything. But that really was kind of the gateway to melding all of those things together for me. And I think shortly after going freelance, getting to use those skills all the time. And then not too much longer after freelancing, I was kind of in more of like a permalance contract position with Riot Games for about 3 years, kind of with some gaps in between. But that was kind of the best experience in terms of industry and kind of getting my foot in like the gaming and entertainment space. And yeah, just getting to art direct and kind of just keep leveling up with all of those previous skills and everything. And yeah, I mean, he's been freelancing for a while. I know he'll get to his side of his experience.
You can tell my story if you want.
But yeah, we've always, when we were both freelancing, we were kind of always in our parallel paths and kind of in tandem. We never actually worked on projects together professionally, which is kind of funny, but we did do a really awesome personal project during COVID. It was like our COVID project, but lasted for about like 2-ish years or so. And that was always kind of arguably the project that got us, freelance jobs. It was always our most like notable work and everything. So that was kind of like our first like hardcore signal of like, we should maybe do this more often. And so, yeah, I think it took, a couple different experiences between, corporate in-house studio life and freelancing to then kind of meet back in the middle and be like, okay, like let's actually join forces together. And hence Sword and Shield was initially talked about years ago. And it's just been a constant conversation and how we wanted to really flesh this thing out. And yeah, we launched, earlier, like a month ago, but yeah, that's where I am now.
Yeah, it's funny. Even my background's very different. So Audrey went to art school. I am not like formally taught. My background is in film. So I started off early in my career as a shooter, a DP. And my idea was I'm going to teach myself how to do this. I'm going to try to get on like small indie film sets or shadow places. And then my goal is to move to LA and make movies. That was kind of, as a kid, that was my thought process. And it wasn't until I grew up in West Virginia where the film scene is non-existent pretty much. I found that wasn't going to be like a viable thing to do. So I went to school in West Virginia. And I was like, this is what I'm interested in. They kind of placed me into like a communications journalism advertising degree program. I was like, okay, cool. And that was kind of my first taste of the like industry we're in now. And I was like, oh, I can take like the creative part of my brain and make money doing this through like advertising. And even through college, that really wasn't the game plan. The game plan was still to like graduate, get a degree, move to LA, end up in the film industry. And I got very fortunate and got chosen to be a part of this like hybrid internship / like work for hire thing at an agency in Richmond, Virginia. And that was where I kind of got my first taste of the ad industry, kind of was thrown into the deep end. And from there, that's just kind of where I found my footing. Audrey and I actually met at an animation studio I was working at in Columbus, Ohio. So I had been there a couple of years in the live action department. Audrey came in probably 2 years after I'd been there. And that's where we met. That's where a lot of our like best friends on earth worked. People in our wedding, we met there, and it was a really cool space. And I think we tell people that we kind of, over the years, between being on the East for so long, both of us, and just that studio in general in Columbus, I think we just kind of outgrew it over time. And we knew we wanted to head out West. And so I took a job at the company Carvana to go in-house kind of corporate to help kind of build out and expand their live action capability. So there was like a DP already there was a producer there, a couple editors, and I came in and kind of as like a hybrid role. And that was in Phoenix, Arizona. So it gave us the perfect opportunity to go out West. We spent about 2 years in Phoenix before I eventually ended up kind of getting nudged by Audrey to go freelance. Because corporate just wasn't my cup of tea. And went freelance, did freelance for a few years. And Audrey and I always talked about doing something like this, like even early on in our relationship years and years ago, about like, wouldn't it be cool to kind of combine forces and try to make something out of that? To her point, we did a COVID project that was amazing. And it's like, of all of the work I've ever done, it's like the most awarded job I've ever worked on, which was a really cool thing. I'm not like a huge awards and accolades person. Like I'm not trying to like push work into like competitions and stuff. So it was cool to even kind of get recognition for that work. Sword and Shield was born out of just like a lot of desire to do things a little bit different in this industry. I think we've been in it long enough to kind of see some of the pitfalls and what like a big agency model looks like. And we just wanted to make the work we want to make. That was kind of the biggest driving factor behind it, and to do it together. So we kind of merged our skill sets. We built the brand for probably a little over a year. Little hiccup in that, where right as soon as we started building it, we found out we were pregnant. And so
No way.
Yeah. And so we were like,
congratulations.
Well, yeah, thanks. And so now we've launched the studio. Our daughter is now 7 months old.
It's amazing.
Yeah, we started building it. I'm talking like a month into building it, found out we were pregnant. We were like, let's just do both of these things as people do, that normal people do.
Not chaotic at all.
And so we built it for a year. We had our daughter, and then really launched about a month ago, and it's been awesome.
Yeah.
That's an awesome story. Yes. Well, congrats to not only being, new entrepreneurs and business owners, but parents. So that's exciting too. But I know that this isn't your first time actually sort of building a company together too, right? I think you guys had both worked on or formed Vandal Gaming, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So Vandal was the
that
COVID
was the
project.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I was a kid, and still we both are, but I was a huge gamer. And the game that my brothers and I played and all my friends played was Halo. Very, very, very passionate. We competed in Halo on like an esports level, and my parents were even in, it was like, we were a gaming family. It was kind of cool. And during COVID, gaming kind of exploded, kind of had this like insane explosion between gaming and streaming, and a new Halo game was coming out, and we would go on these walks every day around our neighborhood.
It's the only thing we could do.
And we still do this, and we would just talk shop about like, wouldn't this idea be cool? What if we made this thing? What if we did this project together? And Vandal kind of formed itself on those walks over months. And I think the starter conversation was not even to really build like a gaming brand. It was just to build this brand in the gaming space. And Audrey came up with this amazing like brand identity for it and designed all this amazing stuff. And we got friends together and shot this video during COVID and did all the like safe practices and like stayed away from it. Like it was crazy. And we built this thing, and kind of overnight it kind of took off a little bit, and it just kept snowballing. And we were like, well, why don't we try to like sign a bunch of kids to a professional Halo team? And it's like, we're not doing anything else right now. And it kind of spiraled into this thing where like, next thing you know, we're in Raleigh, North Carolina, competing in like a professional Halo tournament with these kids that we've signed to this team. It was really insane. And that work won a lot of awards, like creative awards. And it was just one of the most rewarding projects I've ever worked on. And it was one of those early kind of seeds being planted in our minds of like, look at something we built, and like all of ourselves is in this project, and we got full creative control, and every piece of media that we made and every social post we made and jersey designs was a labor of our love into making it. And it was just super rewarding. And I think that was an early indicator that maybe we had something special if we like combined forces and did something together.
Yep.
Yeah, no, well, there's definitely something special there. I mean, like, yeah, talk about like a true incubation period with COVID and just sort of like building this idea and then really formally building it out. And then, just still having those thoughts in your head of like, there's more that we can do. Like, there's more that our talent, we can put our talent to and everything. So, what a cool story. I'm already fascinated with everything. It's probably, you guys have only been in business for a month, but I'm so fascinated by everything you've already done.
Oh,
So, it's
thank you.
awesome. Well, speaking of your specialties in film and motion design and as entrepreneurs too, I'd love to dive into the frame that you're going to be sharing with us today. So could you give us an overview of it and the project that it's a part of as well?
Yeah, so our favorite frame came from Sword and Shield's first like official studio project, and this was an internal project that we had talked about pretty much about a year ago. Like we knew we wanted to make some kind of visual splash, some kind of like first impression to really like launch with, rather than like, hey, like we're a studio. And I think just trying to really put our stake in the ground from the rip of this is who we are, this is something we made, and we put a lot of love and time and effort into it, and worked with amazing talent to make it happen. So this is like our launch ident, just to kind of showcase our logo, a bit of our tone and feel of who we are and our taste and everything. And the ident, it's really a battle sequence. It's kind of a standard kind of, medieval battle sequence. A lot of our imagery is like heavily set in like the medieval, bit of a darker tone. It's a lot of like historical references and stuff that we personally love so much. And just to kind of take control of what we wanted out of our brand and the amount of time we spent on it. I feel like this piece like really laddered up to what we've built. But our favorite frame came out of the ident kind of on accident, and it was literally all thanks to the animator Jessica Rowden that we worked with and hired to make this happen, where she put this in herself. And we, when we were like reviewing, kind of in like the final phases of the ident, and we were watching everything frame by frame, and we saw this frame, and it's literally just for a literal frame, like it's just one frame and it flashes and it's gone. But yeah, so this was a frame that Jessica added in, and it's just for a frame, and it's a super quick little flash, but it's resembling the hero's sword from the ident. And, we can get into all the visual development and stuff that we did on our end to give to Jessica to kind of work from. But yeah, this was to kind of help lock up the logo at the end. And it's just a very cool, like little signature from her that I think is just kind of part of one of the whole reasons why we started Sword and Shield, is to work with amazing talent, to have their voice injected into the work that we make. And it's not just them executing and just like facilitating everything that we want, but, we gave her so much creative freedom to like, here's kind of what we're thinking, but like really just take it and put whatever you want kind of into it and like what you see out of this. And I think we gave her a ton of tools and a ton of things to work with, to where she really did like just amazing with this. So this was kind of like her little like signature, I feel like, and she was super happy that like we found it, but it's kind of been like the Easter egg of the ident.
It was a beautiful moment, because it's one of those things where like we watched this full res kind of move in its normal frame rate, and towards the end we were like, interesting, there's like a flash of white, and we thought at first, we were like, oh, that's like a transitional element. It's just this kind of way to showcase like a slashing of a sword and kind of this pop of color. And then we watched it again, we were like, it feels so intentional. And when we paused it on this frame, we were like, what a genius. And to Audrey's point, it's something that like we didn't direct this. Like this was not creative direction in the sense of we were like put this hidden element in. And she did this multiple times throughout the piece, not quite as subliminal as this. And to Audrey's point, that's just the beautiful thing about kind of what we're building with this studio is our thought process is we should be an artist first studio. Our game plan is to not really scale in the traditional sense, larger than the two of us handling creative direction. Our version of scaling is larger projects mean we can bring on more creative talent to help us execute a vision. And Jessica and Cody, who did the audio design and mix on this, are like great examples of that, because we were very diligent in looking through portfolios and interviewing people, because it's not just about the work. It's also about like tonally the vibe someone gives off on like, do we think like you're understanding what we're thinking from beyond the visuals of this piece and what it represents? And she locked into that so quickly and beautifully. I mean, her art in general is just incredible, but like it's little things like this that just get me excited about the industry that we're in, the world we're in. And yeah, I mean, it was such an incredible moment where we're just sitting around our computer staring at this frame being like, I cannot believe she snuck this in.
Yeah.
And I think it's funny because you do pieces like this and along the way you find out its meaning. This went through 5 or 6 variations. There was an original version of this ident that was going to involve a lot of live action and shooting, and logistically we were like, how are we ever going to like do this in the time frame we have? And it was winter. So it was like, how are we going to shoot this? And then it became another thing and another thing, and it became this. And even along this path, we have this hero character throughout the piece, and we were like, let's make them gender neutral in a way so anyone can see themselves as this person, this hero. But then along the way, we were like, wait, is this just our daughter? You know, like, is this like just kind of like a love letter to her? And like, you know, so we leaned more into that. It was like finding those things as you build something is so amazing.
And letting it come naturally too.
Totally.
I think that's kind of been a testament to Vandal. It's been a testament to the branding and identity of Sword and Shield, and like what we wanted it to be is we really took the time and just let things breathe for as long as they needed to, and nothing ever felt forced. Because I feel like that's when things can get kind of muddy, and you know, we kind of end up regretting like little decisions and stuff that make a big impact. But everything so far, we feel like we've given the proper amount of time and just let things kind of happen, and also learning to like let go of control and just letting, you know, especially when we have other talent involved, and letting them kind of take the wheel. And they've taken us in places that we definitely couldn't have gotten to on our own. So yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you guys definitely have like a true knack for like branded visual storytelling with, you know, not just this, you know, brand film that you guys produce, but, you know, like we were talking about with Vandal and everything too, and previous works of yours as well. One of the things that I love that you said though is that you were sort of like, we just knew that she was going to be a perfect fit for this. And I think that, you know, you don't really think about that when you're like onboarding a team or like, you know, pulling a bunch of different talents together, but really, like truly, everybody's talent does fit. Like every peg does fit in its own area that then, you know, creates this like, you know, big, you know, moment. And I think that's part of the reason why I love like, you know, team projects and working with people, you know, like I'm sure you guys are finding out like working for yourselves now that like sometimes if it's just the two of you, like, you know, that's fine. But, you know, I always think it's more personally rewarding when you're like, yeah, we can afford to bring on all this like really great talent. This is my favorite. Like, I love working with people who are just pushing pixels a certain way and have just got such a amazing creative vision. So yeah, what a cool thing to call out before with the people who worked on this with you guys.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the basis of our studio. I mean, and we're in such an amazing industry. I mean, the talent in general is insane. We put out a general call for people who'd be interested in maybe working with our studio in the future, and we received, it's still running.
We're at about 800, I think.
850
Wow.
portfolios.
We've got some work to do.
And the coolest thing about that is seeing the, like, we added a thing at the end of our form that was like, anything else? Like, do you want to say anything to us? Like, kind of free flow, whatever you want. And the kind of love and support so far on this studio is kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because we're obviously incredibly passionate about this, and it's our dream project, it's our dream studio, it's where we wanted to take our careers, and that's amazing in itself. But then to kind of get that bounced back to us and kind of reflected in a way from like the general community has been a little overwhelming. It's
unexpected,
and unexpected, and
for this long too.
You just put things out in the world that you hope people will resonate with, and for whatever reason, I think the studio is kind of doing that with some people, which is all you can really hope for when you make something. And it's been cool because there's a ton of responses in that forum that's just like, I saw the ident, I want to make that kind of work, and so that's what we're trying to do, at least on our end.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, there is definitely something special here because, even just the way you talk about, like, I guess your not business philosophy, but like, design and creative philosophy too. I think Audrey, you had wrote something on LinkedIn, when this brand film first launched a few weeks ago. I think you wrote something like, Sword and Shield is a place where craft and concept are treated with respect and where the process matters as much as the final product. And I think it's such a strong creative philosophy, and just hearing you guys talk, it kind of sounds like that is like what you're trying to build things around. But, getting back to the frame itself though, too, like how did that philosophy sort of guide this project? Like, did you give yourself like a creative brief for this, or, how did this guide that, the project itself, for this?
Yeah, I mean, like Justin said, the ident as a concept evolved so much from its initial like idea, and when we really landed on like, I think frame by frame is the way to go. We've always just loved frame by frame animation. Like, it's one of the many things that we geek out about, but it's one of those crafts that like is just so beautiful, and like we respect it so much. And so to be able to find someone that could really just execute that, and like it's obvious that they are very passionate about it, that they love the craft. I feel like that was just kind of an immediate synonymous thing. And yeah, Jessica, just her portfolio just really screams that. Even with her personal work, I think her personal work really stood out to us. And it was funny too, because when we were looking at portfolios of like, we have this like dark and edgy kind of like idea, and it's, very textural, and it's very kind of like rough and stuff. And, looking at portfolios, you see a lot of commercial work, and you see a lot of very clean and refined work that's like also very beautiful, but trying to find, and this is kind of where the first time for us of looking at talent and kind of really trying to imagine, like, could they execute this? Can they pull this off? And so we kind of had to wear that hat for a bit. And yeah, I think just talking through process with, and walking through the brief that we had made with them too, and just to kind of be like, how much of this do you want to tackle also? Because, I come from an illustration background, and so I naturally am kind of like, anywhere that I can kind of help, I can. But, in terms of the actual animation and the like, making everything move really dynamically, like that's what we're hiring you for. Trying to
as far as the brief goes though, like we think that's we're creatives in the sense of like, I think a good project and a good product starts with an incredible brief. And I think that is an element of our industry that sometimes severely lacks. And I think it's really tough in my freelance experience. Scope of work, an SOW and a brief are like the golden geese of a project early on. I think if you can't tell an artist what the scope is and then expect them to be able to give you an estimate or a budget is unfair. Because how do I know what to quote you if you don't know exactly what you want and the timeline and all of those things? But a brief is key. I mean, there was so much look dev that went into this, and inspiration, mood boards. We had Figma, like Fig Jam boards that were just insane. They were filled with stuff. We were tossing each other things all day. We even went outside and like recorded ourselves. Like, I don't want to get into that too much because that's super cringy. But
we're not choreographers.
We did a lot of pre-viz and like dev work on this. Audrey did really great storyboards. She did a lot of really amazing character development. A lot of that went through iteration and trying to figure it out. The biggest thing to try to figure out, because there were limited examples of it, was the artistic like brushstroke style of the piece. That came to be kind of difficult to find ref. So a lot of it was like, how do we describe this? Do we mock things up? Does Audrey go in and do like some style frames and hero frames to give inspo to Jessica or whichever artist we'd end up working with?
Yeah, so it was definitely a big combo of all of those things, where we had in the brief, a lot of that stuff was from the brief itself. So like with the style frames, I had drawn a couple style frames with like Procreate, and just kind of getting the sense of here's what kind of roughly the environment would look like. We wanted to keep it kind of vague and kind of just open, because it really was centered around these two characters, this hero and this enemy. And what does our hero look like when the helmet is smashed off of their face and we see the human behind the helmet, and that's kind of its own bit of meaning too. And there's some like subtle kind of meaning with the hero and the enemy and everything, but seeing what our hero character looked like. And then the one thing I think we wanted more than anything that was kind of like a hard note of, now at the end we wanted this final slash from our hero character to kind of like lock into the logo. And it's like, what does that kind of look like? And she did a much better job interpreting it than I did. But just to kind of show stylistically and to really like, don't be afraid, I think was kind of the note of with the roughness and the texture and stuff. I think a lot of our visual references came from Ghost of Tsushima, like style frame, and a lot of their, I think it was kind of some of their like narrative sequences in the game, that was all just black and white, beautiful, absolutely beautiful illustration work.
Kind of ink bleedy.
Yeah, very like inky and just very textural. That was kind of like our North Star with a lot of this, with a lot of our reference. And then, yeah, with the visual development of like, here's what a 3/4 view of our hero and our enemy looks like, and just base level line work. I just didn't know how intense this was going to be for her, and she crushed it. She didn't really blink an eye at any of this. I was like, thank God. And just, what the hero's sword looks like versus the enemy's, and just all of the little nuances of the shield and the armor and everything of, kind of the world building behind each of them too, we're kind of keeping in mind.
Just to bounce off that real quick, the world building of it is so interesting, because we've always been like free flow artists, like just make, but I think we also are very much like in our heads, we go, let's make sure everything's really intentional. And so like, it's cool to free flow and kind of like jazz in the beginning, especially in like the ideation phase and like the inspo phase and look dev and all of that stuff. And then when pen kind of goes to paper, in this case, like iPad, it's funny because like to Audrey's point, like the sword and the shield for both, our hero character, the sword of the enemy, the armor is all very intentional. Like we thought about that stuff a lot, and there's a reasoning behind that. We like to use the word world building, because we think that like brands should be doing that in general. I think that's a way you can bring fans into any brand if you build this world. And I don't mean that in the sense of like gaming. I mean that in the sense of like, when someone sees your brand, what are you trying to have them step into? And we want to do that with the studio. I feel like a lot of studios don't do that. That's a way for us to just have fun and play. And this was the first instance of that. But our game plan is to keep building on this stuff and do internal projects that kind of build this fun world and stuff we want to experiment with and play with. And yeah, so I think like intentionality in something like this is so important, because then it helps a vision come through, I think, a little bit more than just being like, well, just run with like, this character just needs armor, and letting an artist go. It's like, yes, but we have ideas as to what that looks like and why. And it's always cool because if an artist is really interested in the world you're building and they ask why to a question, like why this symbol on the shield, why is it this emblem? We have answers for that. Like it's a fun thing to kind of bring an artist into it and they get to understand it from, that standpoint as well. So it's fun to ideate like that.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. No, I think I couldn't agree with you guys more about intentionality. That's something Ryan Summers said in the first season of this podcast, and it's something I've latched onto ever since. Like, when I first started this whole podcast, I was sort of like, why are people making the certain decisions that they're making? And it really comes down to like, the what's behind the why is that there is a real intention behind every single color choice and compositional sort of arrangement and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, I also would like to, call it the fact that you're saying like, there's got to be some sort of purpose, like, story purpose behind all these little visual elements that are coming together on the screen too. Like, we want people who see this or work with us to like sort of feel this world that we're building for them to like step into. And I think that that's so beautifully said. I agree with you, Justin. I think that like brands that can do that successfully, they're gonna, take off, exponentially. And I think that they're gonna build like a cult like following for that very reason.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Completely agree.
Well, you had talked about, my gosh, you guys said so many amazing things in like that, I don't know, however many minutes. I was like, oh, I want to come back to that. Oh, I want to come back to this one too. But the brief, you were talking about how, it's the North Star. Couldn't agree more with that either. I think that, when I work on projects, whether with client or a personal thing, I always try to like make sure I have like, like, okay, like what is the story that I'm trying to tell so that I, always kind of come back to that with every single decision throughout the creative process. When you were building out this brief, you've touched on some of the visual development stuff already and how you sort of pass those elements off to the animator. Like, how did you come to sort of this visual style? Was it just purely exploration? What got you there?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a time kind of intensive process of like thinking about stuff, talking about stuff, and then letting it breathe for a little bit. I think, again, like a lot of the stuff that we've done, we've had the luxury of kind of taking our time with it. And, that's not always the case with client projects, obviously, but that's, this was such an important thing where, we over time just kind of gather inspo and stuff that kind of catches our eye, we come back to and talk about it. And it's funny how many times more often than not we're like, yeah, no, I don't like that anymore, or no, that doesn't feel right. And again, that's like the luxury of like letting stuff breathe and letting your brain kind of take a minute. But yeah, I think through all of the inspiration that we've saved, I think kind of starting to see the trend of images and references that we saw, that that common thread that kind of started to happen. And again, like really developing out our brand identity and our brand language of like how will the ident kind of fit within the world that we have kind of built from an identity standpoint as well. And also too, just from like a production and like more businessy standpoint, like where is this going to live once it's done? And we really wanted to hit home, like, yeah, we want it to be like around 30 seconds maybe, and we want, our logo and blah, blah, blah. But we also want to have stills pulled from it to be able to use for like eye candy and for our decks and just like backgrounds and just extra art, really. Like it's not just a moving piece, but because it is frame by frame and every frame is hand drawn, being able to have like 800 frames of art like in a folder now is amazing. But really kind of thinking through that lens too. But yeah, I think just over time, really seeing that common thread of where our stylistic choices and taste was kind of lending itself to, and where does this live within our brand and identity and our tone and language and how we talk about Sword and Shield. And yeah, I think over time, I think the visual development stuff from Ghost of Tsushima honestly ended up being more of like really the North Star with stuff. Is definitely a bit more higher in fidelity. And I wouldn't expect, like, I don't even think they frame by frame animated that. No. It was kind of more of just like a Ken Burns kind of thing. Like a push and I couldn't imagine. Yeah, I'll have to throw some more references for that in the folder too, what we were looking at. But definitely, it was black and white, but definitely higher in detail. And I'm like, I don't expect an animator to do this in a month. And then she did. So, yeah.
But I think there was part of it too, where it was like, how hand-drawn, sketched can we make this look? Mm-hmm. Like, to Audrey's point, the frame by frame element of it is like, I come from production. I'm a huge animation nerd. I wish sometimes that's the direction I would have went with my career instead of live action, because there's a jealousy to me behind I have an idea. I have my iPad. I'm just going to make the idea. Audrey, I tell this story all the time. We were in our honeymoon. We're in Europe. We're on a train. I'm like just looking outside because that's what normal people do. And I turn around and Audrey's just hand illustrating all these beautiful pieces. And I'm like, I'm so jealous of like your ability to just, oh, something inspired me. Let me just start drawing. And like for me, I'm like, okay, I need to make sure my camera's charged and my card is good and that the weather's okay. And then I'm going to shoot
Lighting.
it. And then I got to come home. I need to offload that and throw it into the timeline. Oh, it's been 5 days. Okay. But like there's a jealousy behind like, there's just so much artistry behind being able to take a stylus to a screen or a pen to a piece of paper and just going. And there's a little bit of like charcoal and paper elements to our piece, I think. And it's just that like, how do we make it look as hand done as possible?
Yeah. And that's another note that we gave Jessica too, is just embrace any kind of like mistake / just like the roughness of it. Like embrace it. Don't be afraid. Cause there were style frames that she kind of gave back to us of like, you know, here's some brushes that I'm trying out and it felt like too clean. And even though she like tried to make it rough, we're like, no, just go for it, you know? And she ended up having to find like other brushes to use that kind of like gave off more of the texture and stuff, and we put in our own texture in afterward too, just to really like crunch it up, which
there's a grain layer and everything on the final output. It's funny because I feel like through the entire process we did not have a lot of notes for Jessica. We really didn't. It was one of those where it's just like everything was so perfect. The only place it took us like 2 days to kind of get hung up on was like, how much texture do we want out of these brush strokes? Like it really probably was the only time where we were like, push it further or like experiment more with it through the entire process.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, well, Audrey, I'm equally as jealous of your illustration capabilities as well, because I can't illustrate for anything. So again, another reason why I love bringing people on for projects, because again, like there are just so many amazingly talented people in our industry and I want to work with all of them.
Totally.
So yeah, no, I echo your sentiments, Justin. But when you guys were working on this, so it sounds like you guys purely were doing sort of the creative direction end of this whole thing. You really were bringing on people to do the design, the animation, the final mix, so on and so forth. Was there anything like a script that you guys wrote before you came to sort of like this whole, we want it to be hand drawn, we want it to be frame by frame, we want it to feel grungy, we want this sort of like no fear emotional arc? Like, how did you knew you wanted all that stuff? What came right before that? Was there a script of any kind?
I would say between kind of a script, but more I'm looking at our brief and direction like materials, and there's a storyboard in there. It's like 2 pages. I would say this was kind of like a beat board, storyboard kind of thing, where really looking at, I remember I did this because I really wanted to, this was more to kind of show Jessica like contrast of like, you know, the black and white space and kind of trying to figure out, you know, how to make sure our characters are legible and everything with like all this action, but it turned into a storyboard naturally. But yeah.
I think a beat board's a great way to think about it, because this is what Audrey showed me early. We knew all the actions. So if you're asking from that perspective, we knew what the final, I mean, she made the final output that we wanted. Like it was,
okay.
Yeah. It was, we let her play stylistically and kind of saying like, here are the boards. If you find there's a lot of things from our boards that didn't end up in the final piece, because she was like, when she gave us the first round of animatics, she was like, I think it kind of drags here. And we're like, you know what, you're exactly right. And so she found creative ways to then add in like mainly transitional elements. I mean, she killed it on some of those things that we didn't board out. And we would see a whip come in and we'd be like, man, that is so awesome.
It was every time we got an animatic back from her, just new frames or whatever, it felt like Christmas every morning, because she just developed something that we didn't think about, or just cut like seconds out of just better solutions for stuff that we didn't think about, because we're thinking about so many other elements of this in the brief and everything, and she just really creatively solved a lot of things, and again put her own voice into this in so many ways. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely had this like because we got to work on it for so long. It started with on a walk or on the couch or over dinner talking about like, well, wouldn't it be cool if halfway through, to your point of like an emotional arc or like the hero, rising, we knew that was going to be the middle. We like knew very early it was like we know how we want it to start, a middle beat that kind of rises and an end moment. And from there, we filled in the gaps from like a story perspective. The breaking of the helmet, this kind of the one time you see slow motion in the piece was like, oh, is the hero actually losing this battle? We knew things like we didn't want this to feel like David and Goliath. So like we purposely didn't. Audrey didn't design the enemy to be this like huge, larger than life characters, just a little bigger, someone who had like been in battle before. So like all of those, again, back to intentionality, like we did board this out pretty close to what final output ended up being. She just filled in the gaps so beautifully. I mean, it was great.
Well, and it sounds like you guys were thinking a little bit about sound even early on too. And as this was like, really getting into production, I mean, like how did sound influence some of your decisions? Did it influence any of your design decisions?
Oh man, I'll let you speak to this. I will say that sound also deviated quite a bit from
Big
what we
time.
initially thought.
I would argue
Okay.
sound deviated the largest. So the original idea was to go, I had just done a piece freelance. The last freelance piece I ever did was the ask was like, we want something experimental and abstract. We don't know what to do. And I threw out the idea on the last project I worked on as like, why don't we just make a sound bed? No music, which isn't seen a ton in commercial pieces. I was like, I think it could be really cool for what this project is. And it was a huge hit. I loved working on it. It was really cool. And we had a similar idea. We're like, what if we just had ambient, like environmental, like wind, dust kind of in the background, dirt being kicked up, and then just the fight itself. And we used Cody as one of my best buds. He was in our wedding. He was an audio engineer at Nickelodeon. I would say where he's at now, but I actually don't know if he's there yet, and if he'd want me to say where he is now. He's somewhere else that's even crazier. I mean, it's amazing where his careers went, and he was kind enough to lend his incredible talent to this project. And he sent it back, and we were both kind of like, why does this feel empty?
Yeah.
And like, I really thought this would feel full and like this crazy battle, and you'd hear these grunts, and for some reason the grunting and the hitting and stuff, it almost sounded awkward. And we were like, oh boy, we've worked on this for months and months and months, the look dev, all of this stuff. We didn't anticipate deviating on audio, and now it's not working, and we need to like finish this thing. His time's limiting, our launch is coming up, like what are we going to do? And I went in and pulled a track and took his stems that he had provided me and just threw the ident in, had his sound design pass on, and we went through and just started what I call auditioning tracks. And I was like, what about this track? What about this track? And I did a really rough music cut, and we eventually landed on that track, and we were like, I can't believe we didn't anticipate this in some way. It's like the one gap we missed of like, hey, maybe the audio that we have in our head is not going to actually work in this piece. And it didn't. And so we ended up going with like getting a licensed, music track and cutting it up and using the stems to kind of do certain things at certain moments, and having that big hit rise with the hero getting back up and doing all of that stuff. And Cody's just a master. It's one of those things where like, I'm an editor, so audio design and mix is a huge part of like my workflow. But when you get to work with someone who's very specialized in like, no, I'm an audio engineer, what they can do to a piece is unbelievable. It's really impressive. And I got the honor to work with him. So did Audrey for years. We all worked at that same animation studio in Columbus. And he just took it to an entirely different level. And I'm really glad we were able to pivot and do music at the end of the day, because I think it really did just change the tone of that piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I mean, everything about this project is so very intentional. And I think when you kind of look at like the industry now, we're in kind of this big, uncertainty phase, right? Like we've got like new automated tools that people are either embracing or, being a little hesitant about, or, just tighter timelines in general, smaller budgets, evolving platforms. It does feel like intentionality is probably the one thing most motion designers and just sort of like creatives in general should be really like, fully embracing, you know, in order to sort of create these pieces that really have like an emotional impact, like this brand film that you guys produce. So yeah, no, I think intentionality is like such a key. You can see it throughout this entire thing. Just hearing you guys speak about this whole project is just very clear that you had the North Star for every phase of this project and for just the project itself. So, kudos to you guys for really, you know, bringing the story to life. It's awesome.
Well,
Thank you so much.
Well, when you guys look back on building out this favorite frame and this brand film for Sword and Shield, what would you say were the biggest challenges and rewards about working on it?
Oh man. It's funny to say this, but I feel like there weren't really any. Like I feel like the audio was kind of like the main like thing like that happened, but it really didn't become a thing. Like it was a very quick kind of decision. And
this is gonna be weird to say, but like a challenge early was like very early was when we started with this being a live action piece. For full context, it was going to be a piece that, because our studio does kind of the full breadth of creative work, our scope is pretty wide, so we can do live action, 3D, 2D, in different ways. And the idea was we were going to showcase all of those styles in this piece originally. So it was going to start as live action. When they swung the sword, it was going to cut, and we were going to do frame by frame. And then when they swung again, it was going to be a 3D piece. And it was going to be to show that like, we have all these capabilities, and it was huge. And then we got in our head about it bad. We're like, it's winter. I don't even know if we can shoot this. The reference has to be perfect, which means we need to get two people who know how to sword fight. So when we hand the reference off to like a 3D artist, it looks real. And so all of like logistics came in early, which made us pivot, And eventually we landed on this. And I'm so happy about that because like those were challenges. Like once we landed on this as an idea, the challenges lifted off of our shoulders, but the weeks and maybe even months prior to that, it did feel very challenging.
We felt very stuck. Like it was a very frustrating feeling because for us, we tend to be very free flow, and like usually we're on the same page about like what something would look like or feel like. And with this, I think it was just, we were like, there's so many things it could be. And I think the initial idea of like combining them all was just the thing that like we had to step away from it for a second to be like, this is probably just not like if it in our gut, like we really had to trust our gut of like if this is not feeling right already, like us talking about it, like maybe we need to like pivot and think about something else. I'm glad that we kind of realized that early on, because I think a lot of places can get in the weeds with something and trying to commit super hard to something when it's not meant
forcing
to be.
An idea that's not supposed to work in that time.
And like and if you're starting to feel like residual feelings of like not fear. Regret, but like just fear and like just more negative feelings than like excitement and pure just like I know what we're doing with this like with full confidence, then more often than not it's probably like, okay, there's somewhere in this that needs pivoting. So I'm glad we did. I'm very glad we did, because I think once we developed the brief out and we had Jessica was like our number one pick, and she was like, yes, this looks amazing, I would love to work on it. We're like, oh my god, like Jessica wants to work with us. Like we were losing our minds, and everything was just working out the way we had only hoped for, and just the timeline and everything, like it panned out exactly the way it needed.
It's like when you go on vacation and it can either rain the entire time and ruin your trip, or like it's perfect weather and everyone's having a blast and no one gets sick and you hit every green light on your way to the air. Like that's what it felt like. It felt like once we landed on this and Jessica came in, it did feel like we were just kind of gliding. It was kind of euphoric. And then to your point about the most rewarding, believe it or not, like as rewarding as this final project was, and the process was so rewarding. And I just realized how dark it got in here because the sun went out. But like it was so rewarding. Weirdly enough, I would say the most rewarding, and maybe this is like pat on the back and self-indulgent. We had so many artists. We sent out a very quick we're looking for artists for this 2D project. Want it to be frame by frame. Hit us up if you're interested. That response was dozens and dozens of artists, which right off this is before anyone even knows we're doing the studio.
Yeah,
was
very under the radar.
Very cool. And we saw so much incredible work that Audrey and I were, again, intentional. We sat down every evening and dug through portfolios, and it didn't end just on like, they're real. It was like, what obscure personal project have they done? What does their Instagram feed look like? Do they have cool stuff on there? Maybe they don't have on their site. And we narrowed that down to probably a dozen artists we really thought could come in and, help us with that. I'm going to bump our color up because I feel like we just went to nighttime. But the greatest thing was we picked about a dozen artists. We interviewed them with the brief. And we were like, here's our idea. How do you feel about this?
Yeah.
Do you think it's in your wheelhouse? We said, no pressure. Right now on the call, you don't have to answer anything. We'll send you a follow-up email with the deck. You take your time and get back to us if you're feeling good about it or if you have any questions. The most rewarding part of the entire thing was we didn't have an artist who didn't really want to be a part of this. And there was something about getting those emails and being like, I want to do this with you guys, or I have a job, but after the job ends, if you can push the timeline, I would love to do that. Even that Jessica was on a job when we were supposed to do this, and we pushed the timeline so we could work with her.
Yeah.
And like all of those emails and having those conversations with, to me, people who are at the top of their game in this industry was really, really rewarding, because it felt like we had either the brief was really working or they were just really interested in what we were building, and the piece seemed interesting enough to want to be a part of. And that was so rewarding.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the final product is just exactly what we could have, more than we could have dreamed of. But that process was very, very rewarding to me personally.
Yeah.
I love how the rewards and the challenges are like complete polar opposites too. That like, the reward is that there's such a euphoric feeling around it, and that how Justin's like, and the challenge was, we don't know a lot of sword fighters, so that's a problem.
Yeah.
I think that's why I love asking that question, because like you really don't know like what people are running into when they're building out a project. So I just thank you for saying that, because that's so funny. I think that's hilarious.
So true. Yeah. We're never going to show the videos of us in our backyard with broomsticks,
Yes.
but it sat us down for a second. We're like, we can't do this. We need to find some like LARPing kids, or like,
Yeah, it's like, I'm not sending this video to anyone.
This is not reference.
If we
for
want
anyone.
to continue to have any self-respect.
So
It's so good. Well, I feel like I kind of have an idea what your answer might be to this question, but I always have to ask it, what about this frame makes it your guys' favorite frame?
I think, and you can have your own answer, obviously.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But I think for me, to sum it up, it's like, it is a huge chunk of our ethos of when we bring in the best talent to make the work that we want to see in the world. It is rewarding in so many ways, and to let someone kind of be an artist and to let them have their own piece of the pie and everything. Yeah, it's just the most rewarding thing, and it's the thing that we look at and the most when we watch our ident now, and the fact that other people have pinged us and told us that they found that frame and everything and they thought it was super cool. I think it's just a testament to the talent when you assemble the right team, and you have the clear direction and the intent and everything behind it, all the dreams can come true, but yeah. What do you think? Is that what you're going to say?
Pretty much. I completely agree. For me, it is, even going beyond just the studio, the way my brain has always worked as an artist is like, when you come onto a project, like if you can pour yourself into something, like that glass is just going to be so full by the end. And that's where like the best pieces are made. I think we're in an industry a lot where things get kind of sterilized a lot of the time. That's just the commercial and ad industry. I mean, that's the hard truth of it. And you don't get a lot of projects where you can really, really, really like pour your blood, sweat, and tears into. And at the end, it's like, no, my identity is in that. And I think in a lot of ways, whether intentional or unintentional, that's what Jessica did with that frame. We never brought that frame up. We never, she understood it kind of on like just a soul level of what we were doing. And I think she was like, you know what would be really cool in this instance for a singular frame is I'm going to like hide this Easter egg in and see if anyone notices, because that's my little mark on it. It's like Audrey said earlier, I feel like that's her signature in the piece. And so that's just, I mean, that's amazing. It's such a cool thing to be able to bring into a project as an artist.
Yeah, no, for sure. Oh, I love that. What a great answer. Well, guys, I feel like I could speak to you for hours about this brand film, your new studio, and just you guys in general. I mean, you're like the dopest couple on the planet. I can talk to you right now. So. But no, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your creative processes as well as this favorite frame with us. If people want to connect with you to learn more about what you're working on, what's the best way for them to do so?
It's either Audrey or Justin at swordandshield.tv. Yeah. We have that email. I feel like we're plastering it everywhere. So.
And
LinkedIn and all that stuff.
LinkedIn should be able to find us, Sword and Shield. And then the Instagram handle, which is a whole different story about Instagram and what we're trying to build on there. But it should just be swordandshield.tv on Instagram.
Okay, great. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to share your information and links to some of the resources we've mentioned here for our audience to check out. But that wraps it up for today, everyone. Feel free to email us at styleframesatpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think of the show. And if today's conversation inspired some new takeaways, please drop them in the comments below. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and review the show on your favorite podcasting platform as well. And lastly, come connect with us on social. We're on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you again, Audrey and Justin, for joining us today, and we'll see you all in the next one.